All right, I think we can go ahead and get started. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming and spending your afternoon with us. Um, you are here for K through 12 Waste Deep Dive, an expert and educator case study program. And I have just like a few little starting notes to make for us. So today's event is being hosted by Illinois Green Alliance, which is the program, the organization that hosts the Illinois Green Schools Project. It's also being hosted by Missouri Gateway Green Building Council, which runs the Show Me School Suite, Sustainability Suite, and also Environmental Education Association of Illinois. This is our second PD event together, and we are excited to deep dive into waste today. We're going to start off just with a few notes. We're recording this session, and you'll all receive a follow-up email with that recording. And you'll also get a PDF of the slides, and we'll make sure that every link and resource that's noted today is a hyperlink that you can use and access easily. So for reporting today, if you're tuning in from Missouri, things are pretty simple, but it also somewhat depends on your district how you report. We've got a little bit of information here, and again, you'll get all of this afterwards. My understanding is that you reach out to your district for kind of their specific reporting rules. But if you have any issues with that afterwards, you can reach out to us and we will be happy to help you figure it out. And for the Illinois side, we're going to put a link in the chat right now. So what needs to happen for you to get PD as an Illinois attendee is you need to sign this beginning sign-in sheet, and then there's going to be another sign-in sheet at the end, and you have to sign both to prove that you stayed for the whole event. Those are the ISB rules. So make sure that you use this link that's in the chat, and we'll maybe put it in again in like 5 minutes just to make sure anyone didn't miss it. And then there will be a link at the end as well. And then once you've done that, we're going to reach out to you afterwards and follow up about the PD Plus system evaluation you need to complete. And our Breck from the Illinois Environmental Education Association will follow up and help make sure that happens for everyone. But she can't do that unless you put your name and information on these two sign-up sheets, so it's important to get that filled out. Okay. And this is our fun little giveaway. I have a stock of some leftover waste audit supplies that I want to find a good home for. So if you are interested in doing a waste audit with your students for your school and you would like to be in the raffle for a free delivery, a box of, we've got some disposable smocks for students to wear and protective eyewear and a bucket and a digital scale and a lot of disposable gloves. So if that is something you're interested in, please use this QR code or the link in the chat. And I'll also put that up again at the very end. But get your name in there and we will add you to that raffle list and I'll follow up afterwards to notify the winner. And I see someone has their hand raised, and I don't think that Zoom is letting people unmute today, but feel free to put your question in the chat and I'll see it. And happy to answer questions along the way. We're also going to have a Q&A section with our expert speakers and a Q&A session at the end with our educators. So that is something to look forward to. So now I'm going to introduce you to our expert speakers today. These are two people who work in waste reduction with schools, and they're going to explain who they are and take it from here. So I will let Becky start us off.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, we can hold on the slide for just a sec. So very happy to be here. Thanks for having me. First, I just wanted, before I get into the presentation. Just wanted to share a little bit about my background and how I got here. I started my Green Schools journey when my son entered kindergarten about 17 years ago. So I've been doing this work for a long time. I first formed a green team at a school and then volunteered in that capacity for 10 years. And as a volunteer, I worked at the school and district level, bringing composting to the school district, creating school garden, working on just all sorts of different environmental projects. And we brought together representatives from all of the schools in the district, and eventually we managed to advocate. We advocated for them to hire a sustainability coordinator at the district level. So that was a huge accomplishment. And then also did the same at our local high school, worked a lot on waste reduction efforts, and eventually they also hired a sustainability person. So that's made a huge difference in both of those districts. And I've been involved with the Illinois Green Alliance over the years, helping to plan a statewide Green Schools Conference. And I've also been super involved in the Green Classroom Professional Certification, helping to co-create a workshop for that and working on the exam portion of that certification, and also on the Green Apple Day of Service, which is no longer around, but participated in that for years. So I connected initially with Seven Generations Ahead through my volunteer work, and then I'm thrilled that I've had the privilege of doing this work in a professional capacity for SGA for the last 7 years. Next slide. Actually, two more slides. Thanks. So SGA, I'll refer to Seven Generations Ahead as SGA because that's a mouthful. We build environmentally sustainable and healthy communities and tackle the climate crisis with solutions that are bold, equitable, and just. And we are currently celebrating our 25th year of local action in the following key issue areas: greenhouse gas reduction, local sustainable food, waste reduction, composting, and youth engagement, among others. Next slide. So with the Zero Waste Schools program, we empower Chicago area schools to reduce waste, fighting both the climate crisis and food insecurity by shifting operations and minds toward generating zero waste. And we do this through source reduction, recycling, composting, and food recovery. And we help schools in the following ways, which I won't go through. And we also work to drive policy changes at the state level. Next slide. So our work with the Zero Waste Schools program is really guided by these two diagrams that you see, the zero waste hierarchy and the wasted food scale. So looking at both of these graphics, we see that source reduction is at the top before diversion. So we really work to move food and plastic waste out of the waste stream by trying not to create it in the first place. So you'll see that composting and recycling are lower on both of these models, meaning that they are not our first choice solution. Next slide. So why should we reduce waste in schools? It gives students something positive that they can do on a daily basis to combat climate change. And as we know, a lot of students have climate anxiety. So this is something very hands-on and tangible that students can do every day to make a difference and make themselves feel better in the process. Empowers students and provides them leadership opportunities, teaches students to value resources. Your school can serve as a model for other schools and for your community. And there's a great potential for cost savings when we're working on waste reduction initiatives. Great way to make curricular connections. And also it helps to contribute to your community waste goals. Next slide. So I wanted to give some context about the scope of the problem of food waste. So we do work a lot, really focusing, as I mentioned, on food and plastic waste. So first, I'm going to talk a bit about food waste reduction. So specifically in K through 12 schools, before going through some solutions, because there are a lot of solutions to this issue. So over 7 billion school meals are served each year in the US, and much of that food is going to landfills rather than nourishing students. And the World Wildlife Fund has estimated that food waste alone in US schools equates to 530,000 tons annually, which equates to $1.7 billion per year. So we work a lot with Chicago Public Schools, and in the 18 schools that are currently part of the Zero Waste program, our waste audits have revealed that 29% 29.6 tons of edible food is diverted from the landfill annually through the use of share tables. So imagine if they weren't using share tables, all of that food would go to the landfill. So that at 29.6 tons equates to 1.64 tons per school, and that equates to 49,333 meals. That's just in 18 schools. So imagine how much edible food can be recovered in the entire school district. Next slide. So a great way to engage students to start thinking about the waste they generate is to do a waste audit. So as you can see from this pie chart, the majority of the waste we measured at this was a waste audit at a high school that we did a couple of months ago. Majority was wasted food, and that is very typical in a school lunchroom. So a total of 63 pounds were unopened foods from the school lunch or whole pieces of fruit, which could easily be rescued through the use of a share table. And then about 205 pounds were food scraps or partially eaten food. So when we see results like this, we really work to figure out why there is so much food being wasted, and then we try to get to the root cause of it. So next slide. So we like to start by looking at how to prevent food waste from occurring in the first place, as I mentioned before, looking at that zero waste hierarchy and that source reduction, since it saves resources as well as money. So offer versus serve is the ideal way to prevent edible food waste. So offer versus serve, otherwise known as OVS, says that for schools in the National School Lunch Program, students must be offered at least five items, but they only need to take three. So one of those must be a fruit or vegetable. And as part of OVS, milk is not a requirement, which is a very common misconception that students have to take milk under OVS, and they do not. So OVS is optional in elementary and middle schools, but it's mandatory in all high schools, at least in Illinois. No, I'm sorry, in the United States, because it's a USDA program. I misspoke. Next slide, please. So the USDA has found that the use of offer versus serve is associated with lower levels of plate waste. And in a study done by the nonprofit Cafeteria Culture, students actually consumed more food with OVS since they were able to choose the foods that they were more likely to eat. There's a lot of confusion around OVS regulations, so it's important to educate everyone in the school, not just the staff and not just the students, about the rules. Next slide. So what can you do as an educator? First, make sure you understand what is and isn't required, and then make sure that your students understand the parameters. We have an educational presentation about OVS that you can use in the classroom, which we'll be sharing in the follow-up email. And if you bring students into the lunchroom, talk with them as they're lining up about the menu choices so that they're prepared to make a selection once they get up to the serving line. Talk about food in the classroom, normalize eating a variety of foods and trying new things, and bring edible education into your classroom using all of the many amazing resources that are out there. This will help reduce lunchroom waste and also teach your students to value food. Next slide. So share tables are another way, as I've mentioned, to keep good food from going to the landfill. So a share table is a place where students may put school food items, unopened, factory sealed, or whole pieces of fruit from the school lunch that they did not eat. So depending on local health codes, foods can be used in a variety of ways. And I've got some of those listed here. So like the surplus food that is left at the end of all of the meal periods. Next slide. So what can you do to encourage the use of share tables? You can set up a share table in your classroom if you have breakfast in the classroom. These items could be eaten later for snack or be brought back to the kitchen to be served again. You can advocate for a share table to be set up in the lunchroom if there isn't one already, and get your students to help with the process. Can collect that surplus food and help redistribute it for after school snacks and other uses throughout the school. And again, education is key. So show your students our share table video. Again, we'll be sharing that, and you can share the World Wildlife Fund's Food Waste Warriors lessons that are just amazing. They do a wonderful job of connecting food waste to biodiversity and habitat loss, something that, children often feel strongly about. Next slide. So now we'll address waste sorting in the lunchroom. Most of us don't realize how much is thrown away in a lunchroom on a typical day, but this is what most school cafeterias look like at the end of the meal periods, which is quite appalling. Just piles and piles of garbage and a lot of single-use plastics. Next slide. So to address what we just saw on the last slide, we compare the prevention strategies that we discussed with lunchroom recycling and composting. So diversion through recycling and composting is essential to waste minimization, since it's very hard to avoid all waste, especially since, a lot of us are just starting our zero waste journeys. So it's important to have an organized station like the one that you see here and have no extraneous containers around the lunchroom so that students really have to think about, they come up to the station and they really have to think about where their waste goes rather than just having, dumping into the nearest garbage can. So a typical lunchroom with this type of sorting setup will divert 80 to 90% of lunchtime waste. And that includes the edible food being placed on the share table. Next slide. So what can you do in the classroom to support lunchroom sorting? So this list is just some of the many ways that you can connect what students are doing in the lunchroom to the classroom. You can help by encouraging your students to help monitor the sorting station and even make it a class job. If you have an elementary class and you guys have class jobs, it's a really nice way to kind of incorporate classroom sorting and encourage your students to participate. Use waste audit data in math lessons. You can create sorting signage for the lunchroom station. You can organize a competition among classes to see who can reduce the most waste or have the cleanest waste streams. And you can create a sorting game like the one you see here so that students can hone their sorting skills. Next slide. So there are really endless ways to reduce waste and teach your students sustainable habits in the classroom. One of the most important things you can do to minimize waste is to encourage your students to think about all of the materials that they use on a daily basis. Teaching them to value what they use and to not treat all of their items, specifically their school supplies, as disposable. So listed here are just a few of the ways that you can create a culture of environmentally responsible students in your classroom. In these photos, you can see that this class has their own sorting station since they eat in the classroom. It's a pre-K class, and these students will be very ready to sort when they get to the cafeteria next year when they're in kindergarten. Next slide. So here are some of the resources to get you started with some of the initiatives that I've discussed. And I specifically wanted to highlight the Food Waste Reduction Toolkit for Illinois Schools, since it has a lot of detailed guidance on how to measure, prevent, recover, and divert food waste, all of the things that I've been talking about. And again, all of these links will be available in the follow-up email slides. Next slide. So lastly, another amazing resource that we have, that we all have access to, is the Illinois Climate Education Hub that was recently created to support HB 4895 that was passed into Illinois law in the summer of 2024. That law mandates climate education in all Illinois public schools. And the Illinois Hub includes teacher-designed lesson plans, vetted standards-aligned resources for all grades and subject areas, professional development for educators, and news articles, and a whole lot more. So I highly recommend that you create a free account and start taking a look. And I see that Katie is on our call, and she is our state lead, and I'm sure she'd be happy for any of you to reach out to her with questions. So that's all I've got. And next up is Ben.
Thank you so much, Becky. Hi, everybody. My name is Ben Winkler. I'm the one in the photo with the black polo, not the rainbow hair. And I am an environmental resource specialist working for St. Louis County Public Health. I'm specifically with the Waste Diversion Department. It's a cute little program. There's 4 of us. We do different things, including electronics drives. We have a an app, which is really cool that you should all check out called Recycle Coach, where you can scan items, you can type in any item to find out if it should be, how it can be disposed of, where it can be donated, where it can be returned, or if it should just go in one of your bins. So that's really cool. We offer all sorts of fun education for adults. My specific role is I'm the school's outreach coordinator. So I spend the majority of my job going to schools within St. Louis County and offering free programs from K, sometimes it's preschool if I'm feeling nice, from K all the way up to 12 about different waste diversion journeys. So waste diversion being anything that diverts waste away from landfills. So we cover recycling, compost, plastic in the ocean, all sorts of topics. All right, say goodbye to the little puppet. Next slide, please. All right, so waste diversion education. There we are doing a lovely compost activity in a gym. I believe that is a whole bunch of first graders that got to get their hands dirty digging through compost. So the things that I really like to focus on with waste diversion education is making it accessible, having it be grade appropriate, and then really fun versus the doom and gloom. Because as Becky said, there is a lot of climate anxiety right now, and depending on the age range, kids can take a little bit more of that and can have deeper conversations. And we don't want to scare the youth. We don't want to scare the little ones. So accessible, I mean that in a few different ways. I mean accessible in the sense of trying to get the information out to everyone, trying to get the same information out to everyone, and also just being really aware that your school might look completely different than another school. And so you have to really meet people where they are. I think as educators, you all know that we have to meet the kids where they are. Some schools are, of course, going to have more money and more resources and might want to recycle, but might not be set up for success from the get-go. And it would be awesome to try to get everybody to be able to start their zero waste journey. So grade appropriate, that's a huge one. I like to tell middle schoolers and high schoolers about making sure you don't put your plastic bags in the recycling bin because it can get stuck up at the materials recovery facility and people can lose arms. I wouldn't tell that to a kindergartner. So we just want to make sure that we are being appropriate and talking to people at a good level. All right, fun versus doom and gloom. I'm going to get into all the different programs I offer. Those programs are free for anyone in the county. I'm not just promoting myself. These are all things that would be pretty easy or fun for you to put into your classroom, even if you don't have someone to come do it. So we'll chat about those in a bit. Next slide, please. All right, recycling at school. So I love all of the things Becky was saying about food waste. That is a huge issue. I'm going to talk mostly about recycling. So recycling at school is lovely because it's something that the kids can physically do. But at first, we have to see, is your school set up for success? Number one, does your school actually have a recycling contract? You might not know. If you do, you probably have a recycling dumpster out in the back of the school or somewhere on your property. So if you're not sure about that and no one in your building seems to know if you actually have a contract, you can call your administrative office and they should have that information for you. That's a good start because especially during the pandemic, I know in 2020, many districts around the St. Louis area had recycling and stopped it during the pandemic because there was just too much going on. People were scared about contamination and money and the world is what it is. So first up is a recycling contract. If you don't have one, there's a few different things you can do. You can try to talk to administration and get that going. The chances of that happening are slim because things cost money, but there are some other options. There's a company that will supply a bin that's just for paper recycling. Maybe that's where you can start. Maybe that's something your school can do. If they can't have a full single stream dumpster in the back for all sorts of recycling, maybe you just start with paper. That could be a thing. You also could maybe just focus on trying to educate the kids, get them excited with different sustainability efforts as you work towards that contract. The other thing, I have worked with schools before, this is a lot, I'm not suggesting you do this, but an option would be, I know teachers will literally gather as much of the recycling as they can from the classrooms, especially if it's a smaller school, and they will just drive it to a facility that allows you to just drop off whatever you want. So that's also an option. So if you don't have a contract, it doesn't mean it's impossible to recycle at your school, but it's going to be a lot harder. So let's say you do have a contract. Yay, we're off to a good start. If you have a recycling contract at your school and you've got a dumpster, great. Now, who is actually going to be handling these bins in your classrooms? First of all, we need to make sure we have bins in the classrooms. And then people love putting plastic bags in your bins. We don't want to put plastic bags in the bins because that's how people lose their arms, as discussed a second ago. So that's a big thing I see in schools where people are really well meaning and they've got their bins, but the bins have bags in them. So that goes to the education, getting everything streamlined. So, say we've got the dumpsters, we've got the contract, we've got the bins. That's awesome. It's been helpful with a lot of schools to have clear labeling and have the different pictures of the different things that can be recycled posted on the wall right behind where the recycling goes, and make sure that you have two bins. I've been in classrooms that have had a recycling bin, but then they don't have a trash bin. So where is their trash going to go? It's going to contaminate the recycling. Um, Also, who's responsible for emptying it? A lot of times it will be the custodian that is there during the day. Sometimes it is um, the contracted out custodial staff at night, which doesn't actually work for the school. If that's the case, often those people will just throw it in the garbage because they aren't working for the school, they don't know your recycling system, and it's not in their contract to actually worry about the recycling. So what a lot of schools do that works super well is have the kids do it. That could mean that the student council does it. That could mean that there's a grade that takes turns. Fourth grade and fifth grade like to do it a lot. Or if you have a green team or sustainability club, they could be in charge of emptying the recycling bins each week. And that's just a matter of, again, coming up with a plan and streamlining that information. All right. So share tables. Becky talked a lot about the food. Share tables are a great idea. I've run into a lot of schools that aren't allowed to have share tables. So if you're a teacher and you're like, we don't have one, just talk to administration, see what's going on there, see if it's a health thing. A lot of schools, again, in the pandemic, stopped doing things like that. So they might just need someone to lead the charge. Also, with share tables, there's a bit of not privacy, but you do want to make sure that kids feel comfortable and safe going up to the table, that there aren't, that, if they're taking food from it, that there isn't. What I'm saying is that often share tables are off somewhere where you don't necessarily see it as much because there is a bit of shame and we want the kids to actually take it. Also, I know that there are schools where the share table isn't allowed in the cafeteria, but individual teachers have done it themselves and have provided that little bit of extra food. It's also a good idea to know where the food is going from the share table after the fact. All right, let's move on to the next slide, please. All right, so start with recycling. So when doing this sort of education, there's a lot of information. I really like to not overcomplicate it, especially if schools are just getting started off. I mentioned just starting with paper. I said that originally as in getting one of the bins that just takes paper, but honestly, if your school hasn't been recycling it, well, if your school isn't recycling, you're probably not on this call. But if you know someone and their school isn't recycling, it's a good idea to just start with paper, even if the bin is single stream out in the back parking lot. If it's single stream, instead of being like, okay, kids, throw all the recycling in one bin, honestly, starting with paper is really lovely because it's the most common thing to be recycled in schools. Kids probably aren't going to have a lot of soda cans. They might have some plastic bottles, but they probably also will have their reusable bottles that are all the rage right now and kids are carrying around, which is lovely. So it's a good idea to just start with paper. And then once a few months go by, you can do an audit, you can kind of check how that's going. Make sure that paper means notebook paper, computer paper, construction paper. It doesn't mean snotty tissues. It doesn't mean paper towels. You want to talk to them about why that is. And then once you see that they're doing that really well, yes, you can graduate to some of the other things. We call it stick with the six. So paper, cardboard, bottles, cans, food containers, glass. A lot of those things aren't even going to be in the school. But food containers in the cafeteria, if you have a system like Becky pointed out with all the different bins, and especially if you have a star student of the week or a teacher that's kind of overseeing that, that's lovely. um, Getting started, though, a lot of schools that try to recycle, kids will put entire or like half full milk cartons in the recycling, which then, of course, contaminates the entire thing. So, really, just starting with the basics. What can be recycled? Let's get them on board with that, and then graduate to doing more sustainable efforts to really try to aim for zero waste. All right, and the last thing on here, we have make actionable. It is so important for kids to feel like they're actually doing something. I think that's a big combatant for the doom and gloom if they can actually do something. And so that's why recycling is nice. A lot of schools do have gardens and the kids get to work out there and be part of that. Amazing. But recycling is something that each kid can be like, I have this piece of paper, I'm going to put it in the bin, I'm making a change. All right, next slide, please. All right. So some of the programs that I do and how they relate to different grades and how you could incorporate them if you don't have access to me or someone like me. Um, we do a puppet show. It is the basics of recycling. It is super fun for K through third. I've also adapted it for preschool as well and just changed the language. What's really great about it is it's 15 minutes, so it's a good attention span. And then there's 15 minutes of questions and answers. You're going to get all sorts of really cool questions. Sometimes they're about recycling, sometimes they're about the puppets and the theatrical element of it, which I think is really cool because it's that cross education, multiple topics to really get them interested. I do the puppet show, and then if I come back to the school at another time to do a different activity, you'll have kids in the hallway be like, oh my gosh, it's the puppet guy. And they'll ask where Destiny is, who is the rainbow haired puppet from the beginning of this presentation. And so it sticks with them. And then if I do have something scheduled where I'll come in and say I talk about compost, I'll start by bringing up the recycling and see what they're remembering. And those things really do stick with them. Recycle Relay, I'm sure you're all familiar with relay races. Recycle Relay is a great activity to let them do sorting. It's a game, so you'll just set it up with two bags that have similar type of items, the same number of items. You make two lines of kids. You can do this outside, do it in the gym, do it in the classroom if you have space, and you let the kids do a little jaunt over to a trash can or a recycling bin. You wouldn't probably want to use a real one because you want to be able to get the props out and reuse them. But it's just a really fun sorting game. I always grade them. I check them for accuracy and I check them for speed. So you cheer them on, little cheerleader, and as they're putting things in the either the trash or the recycling, it's also a really great conversation for what some of the other options are other than trash and recycling. So in my recycle relay bins, or bags, I have things like clothing. I have wooden spoons. I have different things that wouldn't go in the trash necessarily and wouldn't necessarily go in a recycling cart, but I give them the option of the two. And the reason for that is to really try to keep the recycling from being contaminated. Part of the hardest part of my job is people that mean well that end up contaminating all the good recycling because they're like, it can be donated. Cool. Donate it. Don't put it in the recycling bin. So in that case, kids would take the clothing item, they'd put it in the trash can, and then when I'm going reviewing them, I'm pulling the things out. I pull it out. I'm like, you got it right. It doesn't go in the recycling bin. Where could it go? Then we talk about reusing, um, repurposing, and we put it in, you could donate it. Awesome. Decomposer Detectives is about compost. I just did that all week long because it's April, super fun. And that literally is a pile of compost, and we talk about what the decomposers are doing. That's really good for, we have it for first through third. That's really good for second and third grade because that's when soil is in the curriculum. So it ties in really well. Whenever you have we're talking about sustainability or waste reduction, it's lovely to have it tie into some other topic, and kids get to learn about the different food that you would put in there, and we talk about, what can and can't go. Eek It Leaks is an engineering activity. This is awesome for 3rd through 8th grade. I know that's a big gap, but what I find really cool is that the 3rd graders aren't as afraid to try different things. So I talk about landfills, we learn about leachate, which is the liquid that is created from rainwater passing through a pile of trash at the landfill. And we talk about the plastic tarp at the bottom and how the landfills try to attach things to keep it from leaking. So Eek It Leaks is an activity that just takes plastic strips and tape. Kids work in teams of 2. They problem solve. They try to make something to hold water, pour water, it leaks. They get to go back and keep working. That's a lot of fun because it is that hands-on. And again, the age range is just you use different vocabulary and you work it out. But I've definitely had 8th graders have a great time with it, and I've had 3rd graders be super good at it because again, they're not afraid to try things, and they don't get as embarrassed. So the picture on this slide is an example of one of the bags that the kids made. What lurks in the back of the fridge is all about food waste. It's Reader's Theater. Reader's Theater has been super fun because it gets kids to participate. It also, it's a moment for them to read out loud. And often I would check with teachers and be like, who wants to do this? Who's comfortable with this? There's also a game show element to it. I'm adapting, it says 4th through 12th. We also offer that for adults. I've gone to some nursing homes and um, assisted living places where they're like, yeah, bring the Reader's Theater, and that's a lot of fun. It's about food waste. We go through the hierarchy and we talk about all those different things. The game show part of it is called Eat It or Dump It, where kids see pictures of different school lunches and we have a discussion of like, why are we eating these things, or why are we dumping them. I think I might have gone over time. I'm so sorry. So paper making is the last thing, that is recycling paper, and we offer that a lot at STEM nights. So paper making is something that you could do in your classroom. You just need a blender, paper, and water. I know that was a lot of information. I've had fun chatting with you all. Thanks for having me. If you have any questions for Becky or I, now would be a great time. Next slide, please. Questions?
Awesome. Yeah, we're going to take a minute here. If anyone has any questions that they'd like to ask Becky or Ben, it could be things that are specific to things you're trying out, or things that you want to, make sure that your school is or isn't doing in a certain way. You can throw that in the chat, or if you raise your hand, I might be able to unmute people if that's easier. But we'll sit for a second and see if anyone has any questions.
I
And
can
if
get my
anybody has any
puppet if you.
questions, oh, sorry.
I was saying I can go grab my puppet if you want to ask the puppet questions. I know that's more fun. Just kidding. She's not here.
If people don't have questions, but think of things later, you can put them in the chat. We'll do a little question moment at the end as well. Um, um, or yeah, feel free to throw something in. Oh, we have one question in the chat. Someone asks, I'm curious how high schoolers have responded to your puppet shows in comparison to elementary level students.
So thank you for that question. The puppet show is K through 3rd grade. I would honestly love to do it with high school students. I think it'd be super cool to get them to kind of help with it and do it and like take it to an elementary school. And I teach the high schooler students how to do the puppet show, would be super cool. But no, the high school students, the activities I do, it's a lot of like green team stuff, sustainability clubs. I'll go in and help them with projects. Um, and then we also offer like the Reader's Theater and the Commotion in the Ocean. I didn't mention that one, but that's about ocean plastic. So we do have activities that are more age appropriate for them, but I think everybody could love puppets.
We have another question. How do you feel about surveys of students to see where they're at and possibly establish a baseline?
Maybe I'm curious where they are, like their knowledge, or what is the school doing? Can you maybe clarify?
Yeah, if you're able to give us a little more context. And I guess if while we're waiting there for a moment, I'm
Yeah.
curious, speakers, if you have any more general suggestions about how to, yeah, kind of like quantify some of this work as someone in the position of an educator.
So doing audits is a really good way to get data. It's a good way to kind of see where they're at too. I really like to ask them questions at the start of some of the activities just to get a general idea where they're at. A lot of the fun with working with kids, for me anyways, is the kind of back and forth. So with the decomposer detectives today, I ask like, who knows what a decomposer is? So I just want to see where they're at. For classroom teachers, you might have a bit more information on where your kids are at. But as a traveling teacher or the uncle of teaching, I definitely do a little bit of just like, hey, and just ask basic questions to see sort of what the conversations need to be. But
And
I think waste audits are a good way to get data, if that was the question.
yeah, for sure. And we also we'll evaluate, we like have an assessment that we do so we can do a walkthrough of the school or even do it virtually with school administrator teachers to kind of evaluate what the school's already doing, and then that helps kind of pinpoint where they could go next. And that helps us evaluate, figure out like what other ideas might strategies might work for them.
We did get some more clarification in the chat from Ben, who said that their question was about more like gauging attitudes, interest, and comfort levels. This is a school that's just getting started with waste, so I think it seems like they're looking at whether student surveys are a useful way to get that baseline.
Yeah, I can speak a little bit to that. So, there's the Green Schools Quest, which is a super cool program that schools can sign up for to participate. It's a competition. And what I've seen a lot of schools do that competition to try to make their school greener is they will do surveys at the beginning. They'll ask their kids that are going to kind of lead it, like, what do you care about? Like, what do we want to, have our project be about? And so that's definitely something that is happening, and I feel is helpful if you're like, where do we start? I haven't dealt much with surveys because I'm in and out of the schools, but I've seen teachers use them to kind of see where the kids are at. Um, but of course, teachers have a lot going on, so I think making things simple to start is good for everybody.
Um, Becky, unless you have anything to add to that, we have another question here. Um, do you have any recommendations about reducing the stigma around the share table, getting kids to interact with it more?
I have to say we have not seen it as an issue. Like it's out there and kids are just excited to that, well, look, free food. Like we've never like been part or heard of gotten feedback that kids have been hesitant to take. The only time we've gotten questions maybe at the high school level, but I was actually just on a call before this with someone who's working with a high school, and she said, we kind of presented as you guys have such a long day. You've got so many activities. You come really early, you stay really late. I would imagine everybody's hungry, right? So it's just kind of like it's here for everyone. And they're putting it out like after school for, all the surplus from lunch. They're putting it out for after school activities and for sports. So I think it just depends on how you frame it. But if it's something that's always out and the kids just get used, because everybody gets hungry at some point, right? Throughout the day. So yeah, we have not encountered that. I think it's just normalizing it and, share it's how you're sharing the information like through morning announcements or posters or whatever, like, yay, free, there's extra food.
Awesome. Thank you. Um, and Ben, I think if you have any more other comments, I think uh, your message just went to host. I don't know if you want me to read that out or, oh, maybe I'm seeing something wrong. We can move on. If anyone has any other questions, we're gonna do a little more Q&A at the end that will include our experts and our educator speakers, who we are about to move into their presentations. So now we wanted you all to hear from some actual educators who have been working in schools um, to do waste projects. And so we're gonna start with Kelly Clark. Um, I'm gonna share my screen. All right.
Okay.
Kelly, we hear you.
Hi, I am Kelly Clark. I am at the Idea Center with the Lindbergh School District, and we do gifted in our center. Next slide. So a little bit about our school. We only do our green school stuff with our third grade because each grade level comes one day a week. They do something different. And they come from 7 different elementary schools within the district, plus we have parochial and homeschool students as well. Next slide. I'm going to talk about our past 2 years of projects. Our first year was our Carbon and Compost Crusaders. So our goal was to reduce our food waste and our carbon footprint through composting and vermicomposting with worms. We installed 2 vermicomposting bins. One was kind of a traveling bin because we realized we didn't have a whole lot of people who wanted to take our worms home over the summer, or to come and care for them at school. So somebody had to take them home over the summer to take care of them. And then we also had our outdoor compost bin. And then along with that, we created a compost cart because our cafeteria where the students eat is pretty far away. And so our cart goes back and forth. The students' roles within this project, they weighed our food waste. They were managing our compost cart, taking it back and forth. They helped sort the food for the worms and the food that goes outside to our compost bin. And then they made educational and informative posters for all of our other students that were in the other grades. Because while we started this with third grade, the fourth grade really got involved and wanted to start composting, and then the fifth grade. And so it kind of snowballed into something a little bigger than we were anticipating. Our project for this year, our goal was to reduce waste in our local environment by advocating and taking action to minimize our pollution and promote sustainability within our community. So we became a stream team and we started our very first annual sustainability night. Student roles, we cleaned up the local creek. We collected the data on the trash that we collected, which ended up being a whole lot of plastic. The students wrote letters and sent emails to businesses and individuals to come be a part of our sustainability night, and then mapped out within our within our building, where each person or group would go and present. And then my favorite part of this is the students created a campaign for less single-use plastics. So if they brought in each student in each class created a sticker to advocate, and then the classrooms voted on their favorite sticker. Each classroom had had one winner, so we had 8 total winners. And if the students brought in their reusable water bottle, they got a sticker because that's the big thing right now. They got a sticker to go on their water bottle for that week. Next slide. So we did have some challenges. The biggest one being our limited student time. We only have the students one time a week. It's only that grade level because there are different themes for each of the other grade levels. So third grade was environmental advocacy. So I really worked to embed our projects into our common curriculum during that hour and a half time. So we only had an hour and a half time, one time a week to do our learning and our project stuff. Then implementing the new systems, partnering with the Missouri Stream team, writing grants to get the stuff to compost, having students volunteer for jobs, such as who gets to take care of the worms, who's going to bring the cart down, who's going to bring the cart back. We wanted the students that were really passionate about that to really step up and say, yeah, I think I can do that. And it gave them more agency in doing it because they felt like they were helping, and they were helping the earth, making less waste. And then our culture shift around our waste behaviors, our students and staff and family, we had to reframe our thinking about what are we throwing away. And so that our solution was the student-led campaigns, the stickers, writing to our individuals for sustainability night, our compost cart, and then our public-facing events, our sustainability night, our stream team cleanup of our local creek. All of those really kind of helped extend our culture of change. And this year, our fifth graders who kind of joined as fourth graders are now also helping our third graders. And then last year's third graders are still super passionate about it. So it's snowballing, which is what we wanted to happen. Next slide. So some of our outcomes, we do a survey at the end of each year and, asking students like, how do you feel about advocating? How do you feel about sustainability? And between the 2 years, 62% of students reported that they felt confident of being able to advocate for sustainability with their family members, with their peers at their home schools, and even with some in the community. We collected 224 pounds of trash from our local creek, which is near our school, in about an hour, which I found was amazing. They were super excited about it too. Our project with our food waste, we did about 49 pounds of food waste was diverted in 6 weeks. We are still doing that this year. We just aren't weighing how much we are diverting because that wasn't the focus of our project. So we are still composting and composting, but we aren't collecting that data and weighing it. The kids definitely have a stronger sense of agency for advocating. When we brought up the sticker campaign, a kid had an idea for a billboard, and that is very expensive. So we came back to a sticker campaign. And one of my little third grade theme students was like, wait, couldn't that end up in the trash too, or end up in the creek, which will end up in the river, which will end up in the ocean? So they are very aware and thinking about these things now all the time. What am I throwing away in the lunchroom? How come our lunchroom is using styrofoam plates? Like they are asking these hard questions of some of our adults, and I am very proud of them for that. And then we have a stronger place-based connection because we know where our trash could end up, where our waste could end up. And so they want to do something about it. And then obviously that school culture shift of asking the hard questions of some of their adults, and then growing our identity as a green school, as a green idea center. Our next steps: continue to compost and vermicompost. We've been doing it for 2 years now, and see where on campus we have native beds where our outside compost bin is. And we kind of want to see where else on campus our maintenance people want to use or would be able to use our compost. Continue advocating. I feel like children are such great advocators for what needs to be done, and this is their future. This is where they are going. We are doing our sustainability night again next year. It is on September 30th. And then just following student ideas. Sometimes their ideas for how to reduce waste, how to recycle, how to get other people involved in this is way better than anything I could come up with. So I think that's the last one of mine. Yeah.
Hi, everyone. I'm the next speaker. My name is Julie Chomko. I'm a sixth grade social studies at Hauser Junior High. Next slide, please. Hauser is located in the southwest suburbs of Chicago, in Riverside. And it serves 580 students, 6th through 8th grade. And I'm part of a green team of teachers that for years has wanted to incorporate composting into our cafeteria. Our cafeteria has always been mindful of being more sustainable. We have a share table. We don't use any plastic utensils, and we use compostable materials. But we'd never tried composting. So we were motivated when we learned about the Illinois Green Schools program to, that's kind of what spurred us on to really take the dive to start composting. And we also have a group, the longstanding group of students, part of an evergreen club. So we kind of had the foundation of a sustainably minded school, and the community is also sustainability minded. Next slide, please. So we advocated for, with the goal of reducing food waste in the cafeteria. We got the support from our administrators and the buildings and grounds. And we used the mini grant to purchase a subscription for an industrial compost service through Waste Not Compost. And what's nice about Waste Not is that they do quantify how much food waste we're diverting to. And someone from Waste Not came to our school and educated the student group, which we took a subset of the students in the Evergreen Club, and they were called the Green People, and they were purely devoted to learning about composting from Waste Not. And they're the group of students that help out in the cafeteria. And they were well versed, and they created a video, which I'll talk about in a little bit. Next slide, please. So the biggest challenge was really educating the staff and students about composting. They didn't know too much about it, and got some great ideas from the previous speakers, especially from Becky about the videos. So I'm excited to use more of those materials that I didn't know about, OVS. So once they learned about composting from Waste Not, the students created a video that we showed in their advisory period on not only the benefits of composting to reduce climate change, but the proper ways to compost. And in the video, they showed that. So if you're interested and want to go back and watch that video, and we're going to make a new video every year with the current 8th graders, and we're in the process of doing that right now. So we have some new people for next year. Can move on to the next slide, please. So outcomes and next steps. We are going to continue composting next year. It is strongly supported by our administration, and our PTO supports it. And they have different meetings where they use the composting. They gave us a grant, so I applied for a grant. Myself and a paraprofessional kind of led the charge, and we applied for a grant through the PTO that we use towards composting costs. And so far this year, we have diverted 2,315 pounds of food so far. And our next steps for next year are to encourage 100% compostable materials in the cafeteria. And also, I'd like to maybe try to work on, doing more curricular connections through science and social studies, for kids to really learn more about the value of using less waste or creating less waste. And I think that is the last slide, possibly.
Thank you, Julie. Kayla, are you there? Are you
Y-
able to?
Yep.
Awesome.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, cool. So hello everyone. I am a sign language interpreter. I actually at the time was working at John H. Kinsey School. Currently I work at Whitney Young High School. I transferred. And I am still very much in contact with my friends over at Kinsey, and I'm happy to say our recycling program has continued, and I'm going to talk more about that on the next slide. So, Kinsey, the culture, we had a recycling program that was set up, and we still had a recycling dumpster. It was mostly used by the janitor staff for big boxes and things like that. It was not a school-wide recycling program. There was a lot of concern about the pileup of recycling items that would happen, and our administration was very concerned about that. And to avoid clutter, they discontinued our recycling program. And it continued to discontinue for 7 years. And then when I started working there, I was like, what? Why is there no recycling? And decided to do something about that. And our school in Garfield Ridge neighborhood of Chicago, 626 students. And something that's very unique about that school, which is why I was working there as a sign language interpreter, there are 46 deaf and hard of hearing children. And it was really awesome that everyone is able to kind of all work together towards this common goal of recycling. And I was able to bridge that gap between our school communities. All right, next slide. So for this project, several things had to be set up. We started a green committee between with our staff, and then we also had a green club with our students. And we also worked in conjunction with our janitorial staff, of course, and our administration. It was, again, hard to get them on board, but when we kind of became a more self-sustaining entity, they definitely were on board, especially when I was presenting that there would not be extra clutter. And we had two 95-gallon street bins that we basically put in two of the lobby areas. And basically each classroom had their own appointed job of the recycling transporter, and they would bring the mini recycling bin within that classroom to these larger 95-gallon buckets, and then the janitors would just wheel those out and dump them out. We have really big plastic trash bags that were lining the bins, and then they kind of just mostly reuse those. And if they get really bad, we thankfully with the grant we bought a lot of those 95-gallon plastic lining bags so that they can replace them. Next slide. So the biggest challenge, so we did, I also have an acting background, and I was leader of the Green Club, and I was also leader of the drama club at our school. And my goal is to try to get as many people involved as possible. So with the drama club, which was much more popular than the Green Club, unfortunately, all of them, I got them involved, and we made this recycling promotional video. And every year I reshare it, especially around this time with Earth Day. And I think we may have time to share it if anyone's interested. It's also ASL interpreted, which is cool. I got two of my colleagues to interpret that. But I don't know if that's okay. But if there's time, it's not too long of a video. I imaged the school.
Is it how long is it? We're also gonna make sure everyone has these links afterwards.
Sure.
Um,
I
but
think a couple minutes. You could double
should
check.
we could play like a little snippet of it.
Sure.
Oh, can people hear the audio? Maybe not.
I'm tired of seeing all of this trash that could
I
be
can hear it.
Okay.
Hey, did you know that 75% of trash can be recycled? Look at this. Wow, I didn't realize that. Recycling may seem new, but it has been around since the year 1031. 75% of U.S. waste can be recycled. 145,000 tons of plastic is wasted at public schools every day. One school wastes more than 320,000 sheets of paper a year.
Okay, I'm gonna stop us there, but that is really cool.
Yeah, they're really cool and very, it was really awesome that the school ended up really enjoying it as well. And I think the kids will rewatch it. And sometimes at Whitney Young, there's also a huge deaf population. So the kids have graduated from Kinsey, and I now work with them, and they still bring that up. And they found the YouTube account that I posted it on is connected to my CPS email. So they think they've like hacked the system and found my YouTube, but it's just educational videos like this. So a lot of them are like, I found you on YouTube and I'm watching your videos. And it's still very much an exciting thing that the kids are watching. And I hope that the kids that are in the video are still watching them as well. But it is the recycling program still is sustaining, and people are participating in it. And I have so much thanks to give to Illinois Green Alliance to providing us the funding so we have new recycling bins in each classroom. Each classroom has the resources. We also taped the Lakeshore Recycling Systems guidelines for recycling to each bin, so everyone can look at the bin and see the pictures and recycle things. We still have, like Ben mentioned, those issues with people putting tissues and things like that in the recycling bin by accident. But yeah, the promo video mentions all the cool things that people can do. And that for the outcomes, yeah, like I said, it's still sustaining, and it's still successful. I thankfully still have a collaborative relationship with the people at Kinsey School, and the students that are graduating from there are coming to the school that I'm at now. And yeah, it's great. Thank you.
All right, I think I'm up next. I'm Tanya Mead. I teach at Nearings Hall, which is an all-girls high school in a suburb of St. Louis. It helps a little bit to understand about the school I'm at. So if you want to go to the next slide. We are a school of about 600 young women, and we are supported by the Sisters of Loretto. And this is a group of women who have long had a mission working with social justice, working with community service. And so our students are pretty well versed in kind of working for justice, doing environmental ministry. Our sisters have done projects like all around the world. And so our students are kind of coming from a really solid background there. Our school has done throughout the years projects through a very several different classes. Currently, right now, we have some environmental projects that are happening through our theology department. My projects and my involvement kind of comes through a club called Planet Patrol. And we've been lucky because we've been doing a lot of school ride recycling and composting for a while. This kind of predates my time at the school, but I asked around a little bit, and the general consensus is that they've been composting for at least 8 years. So when I kind of came into the Planet Patrol and we were thinking about ideas for our Green Quest project, they wanted to kind of push a little bit past that. So if you go ahead and go to the next slide, I was going to talk a little bit about what we have done for our Green Quest projects over the last 2 years. When we start each school year, I've been working with the club And our numbers are not huge. I would say in 25, we were dealing with approximately 20 students, a lot of juniors and seniors. And then this year, our number is a little bit lower. So this is about the number of students that I've been working with. And when we started off the year, we just kind of did a little bit of brainstorming, like, what are you interested in? What kinds of projects do you want to work on? And last year, it was overwhelming that they wanted to work on something related to clothing. Um, they were really concerned about all of the waste that was being created by the fashion industry and kind of doing what they could to sort of change like the values that their classmates had to try to really kind of reduce the waste that they saw. Um, and so we were basically looking at clothing waste. So like it's great that Ben kind of mentioned clothing as something that, can't really be recycled. And so instead of doing that, we need to really be thinking about how can we change our attitudes? How can we reduce the clothing that we buy? And if we can't reduce the clothing that we buy or we've already purchased something, like how can we then sort of like reuse those items? So in the first year working with this, my students kind of had a two-part plan. First, they wanted to create like a website where students from the school could exchange clothing. And they really were looking at how challenging it was for them with all of the special events that they attended to kind of always be purchasing new items and then only wearing them once. So they created a website where you could list clothing that you were willing to loan out, and then students looking for items could then go to that website and kind of arrange like a temporary swap. The other big part of their plan was to do some education. They had a few meetings and talked about some of the issues associated with clothing waste. And they also did host a couple of events where they invited students in the school to come and kind of like repurpose clothing. So you can kind of see a picture there. Before the December holidays, we did make gift bags. We were kind of changing those t-shirts into either like a tote bag or perhaps something that they could package a present in. The students really like that. We even had some teachers kind of donating a bunch of extra t-shirts that people could kind of switch over and make gift bags out of. We also in the spring did a meeting where students could bring in cloth items or even fabric that they had at the house, and we repurposed those into like reusable snack bags. So my club officers had kind of researched how to make these cloth snack bags. We did have to purchase a little bit of extra supplies to do it to make them waterproof, but we did give the students who came in and made the snack bags kind of the option. Do you want to use the extra lining and make your snack bag waterproof, or is that not necessary for you? And so the students were able to kind of take items that perhaps could not be donated or they were not going to wear anymore, and they could then turn it into something that they could use. And both of these items, both the tote bags or gift bags and those snack things, they also had the extra purpose of then not buying something else to use as a gift bag, not buying one-time use plastic. And so those two events were wildly successful. The students really loved them, very positive feedback on those events. The clothing online trading platform, we had some challenges with that. We had a little bit of trouble kind of getting it rolled out because it was a school group. We didn't really get started until September, and we didn't really launch that website until October. And at that point, we'd kind of missed a couple of the really big special events that we had on campus. If we had been able to get that launched earlier, we maybe would have been able to get the students kind of used to using that like trading platform kind of right off the bat. We had a little bit of trouble too, just with the perception of it. And I think probably if we were going to attempt this again, we would try to focus, this isn't a need-based clothing exchange, but instead this is a clothing exchange to really kind of like value sustainability and kind of really approach that from the very beginning. But overall, it was a pretty good year. Our students seemed really happy with what we did, so much so that we decided to kind of stick with that same focus the next year. So if you go ahead and switch to the next slide, our project for this year stuck with clothing. And we kind of tried to adjust a little bit to what our students' kind of tendencies were. And we decided to switch to our on-campus clothing purchases. So our school does have a lot of t-shirts that are purchased for clubs and special events, but we also do have an on-campus what we call a spirit shop. This basically sells a wide variety of clothes that are branded for our school. There are some uniform items there, but it's really the extra stuff, the sweatshirts, the t-shirts, the clothing for parents, the clothing for incoming students. And what we really wanted to do was try to kind of hit our students like purchasing right at the community level, right in our school. And so we kind of had two goals this year. We wanted to try to convince the directors of our spirit shop to stock items that were coming maybe not from the cheapest clothing supplier, but instead to stock items that were from ethically sourced clothing companies. And so my club officers then created a great presentation and scheduled time to meet with our administrators and those that were in charge of purchasing and kind of trying to encourage them to use one of these companies. So they did a lot of research there to try to kind of come up with the different companies and really compared what was good about each company. And they were all a little bit, they all had slightly different missions in their companies. And they were kind of trying to convince maybe instead of, doing print on just like a generic Comfort Colors t-shirt, maybe do a print run on a t-shirt from one of these companies, hoping that hoping that when the students buy things, which we know they're going to, that at least we're supporting like a better company. Um, the other thing that they wanted to do was also try to encourage students to do kind of like no net gain shopping, so that if they were going to buy something from the spirit shop, we wanted them to kind of donate something in trade. So one item in, one item out. And we wanted to kind of give them a coupon so that they could, if they donated something when they bought something in the spirit shop, we would give them a coupon toward their purchase. And our plan had been to fund that with the prize money that we won from our project from last year. We did run into a little bit of trouble just kind of getting things finalized with the spirit shop. Just due to the kind of the nature of my students' busy schedules. The presentation occurred in February, and we weren't able to get the stuff in place for this calendar year, but we are really hopeful that we can still get some of these things into the shop for next year. I think that it would be a great item for our students to be able to see kind of the value of purchasing things from companies. I think it would be really helpful to them to say, you can buy clothes, you can buy new items, but be more mindful about the items that you're purchasing. If you go ahead and switch to the next slide, I know that my school is kind of a unique place and not everyone has an on-campus spirit shop. So some of these items, I just was kind of thinking about different ways that they could be kind of switched a little bit to use in some different environments. So I just kind of have some suggestions. One main thing, and we kind of encountered this multiple times, is that we really need to kind of make sure that everyone understands, and this is kind of an education piece, that all of this work with kind of clothing purchases and fashion items is really a way to kind of reduce waste. Um, yes, of course, need-based clothing swaps are wonderful and they have a use. And we were just kind of saying we might get a little bit more buy-in across the board if we were focusing on the sustainability component so that there wasn't a stigma attached. And we kind of heard a little bit about trying to avoid the stigma attached with the sharing table for food. And I would think that this is an important thing to kind of address here too, just to kind of remove any of that stigma. We also did find that there was a lot of interest on the effects of clothing waste, how much it's adding to landfills. Every time you buy something new, you also have to consider the cost of making that new item. And so, education on those types of things, crops, factories, transportation, all of that is also kind of useful to bring into the discussion. My students did do a really good presentation the first year too, just on the chemicals associated with clothing. And we watched a little video that talked about how when the clothing purchased, especially from some of these really value fashion websites, the clothes were just like covered in chemicals and the different problems that that can cause for people. And if we can reduce cheap clothing purchases, hopefully we can reduce exposure to those chemicals as well. And that might be a way to kind of tie in people that like aren't necessarily already interested. Um, I will also say that like the really successful things were the upcycling projects. Our students really liked that. They had a lot of fun with that. They weren't saying goodbye to their favorite t-shirts forever. They were just sort of changing it into a tote or a gift bag. So that was a really good way to kind of tie in the reusing, even if you can't convince the students to like reduce their clothing purchases. We also kind of want to think a little bit too, and this could be something that any school could use, like, are you buying t-shirts for a club? Are you buying t-shirts for like a parent event or a sporting event? Could you in those cases, seek out like a more sustainable company to purchase from? Could you perhaps like encouraging a trade? We talked about when we were brainstorming ideas for t-shirts for our club, like could we have kids bring in t-shirts from home and then do our own screen printing on shop so that we aren't purchasing a brand new item of clothing? So our students, I think, really liked this. I think it gave them a lot of opportunities to be creative and really to kind of think about the purchases that they're making and how they can really be mindful about the things that they're doing on a daily basis can really have kind of wide-reaching effects. So in those ways, it was a great project. Our students really enjoyed what they were doing, and hopefully kind of changed some, hearts and minds along the way. So essentially, that's what we were up to, and I think at this point, I'll pass on to the next teacher.
Hi, everybody. I'm Bill Rosencrantz. I'm a teacher in the environmental club sponsor at Hersey High School. This is only my second year at Hersey. I started in Chicago, and I worked at a special ed school, Northside Learning Center, which was like 250 special ed students from freshmen to when they age out at like 21, 22. And they had a really nice recycling program in Chicago at Northside. And then when I came out to Hersey, I started implementing a little bit of that into our curriculum. And one thing led to another. I met up with the previous environmental club sponsor, who since retired, just to see if they wanted to get involved, just to see if they wanted to get together with us. And something that's really nice about our school, the career life skills program, is students with like more severe disabilities, the autistic and Down syndrome. And it's just a very inclusive environment here. And we do all kinds of stuff with the regular ed population of students. So I met up with them, and he was the one, I just told him what I had done previously and what I was starting to do here. And he said, hey, we were thinking about applying for this green school thing, a couple of years ago. We never did, but sounds like, what you're doing will be a good fit. So one thing led to another, and you can go ahead and go to the next slide. We got together with there's a SOS, Service Over Self program here. The students at this school are just so great. They're very willing, just excited to participate in, new projects. So we had our program, the CLS program, the SOS, and then the environmental club get together. And right away, the first thing I noticed was that there's this like wide-ranging conspiracy theory that there isn't, that the story that everyone that I hear multiple times, I still hear it, is that there were some students many years ago that followed a recycling truck to the wherever, and they just mixed it in with the trash. So it was kind of, the view was that we maybe have recycling bins, but we don't really recycle. So then this year, we were making new signs, and I'm over at our district building where we have this printing shop, and the guy that works the printing shop told me the same story. So we were dealing with a lot of history of just questionable practices with the recycling. We had great leadership from just the staff was very willing. The administrators were just amazing. Principal, my department chair. It was like anything I asked them, any ideas, they were just like, yeah, let's do it. So we had everything, we have all the recycling bins, but you can go ahead and go to the next slide. But, once we started auditing, I mean, it was the classrooms weren't too bad, but the lunchrooms were like more than 50% garbage and, and food. So that was a big aim. We really wanted to try to improve that. So we did the waste audit. We improved the signage. Some of the recycling bins were like the same color as the trash. That was kind of an easy fix, but we labeled. We had like the pictures. We had new updated signs, and then we do morning announcements every day. Fridays there's video announcements. So we started about once a week, and like every other Friday we were so we had our CLS students. We had the other two clubs getting together, and we were making videos, and we were adding some humor, and it was a lot of fun. But again, so we partnered with the lunch staff, the custodians. Again, everybody was just very willing to do whatever we asked. We were real lucky, I thought. One of the things we did that was the most fun was our Earth Day celebration at the end of the year. It has 125 on there, but I think it was like 150, 175 that we ended up selling or people they would take them and they would give us a donation. But that was a lot of fun, and just it was a really good time just kind of working with, getting to know people that you don't usually see. And there's more, the sentiment might have been, a little bit conspiracy in the beginning, but there's a lot of people out there that are, this is an important topic to them, and they were, happy to help out and participate. Go ahead, next slide. So we saw some improvement. We wish it would have been a little bit better, but I think we can do one more slide after this. Yes, we did make some improvement on the, as far as the classrooms and the lunchroom, but there's still more to be made. We had there were about 30 of our students, about 10 staff members that really participated. We made some good money. And then, now this year we're still updating the signage, and just that alone, just the communicating what goes in the recycling bin, what goes in the trash, was we found just to be super helpful. And this year, or next year, we have a lot of turnover in our in the administration, so we're going to have to kind of wait until the beginning of next year, over the summer, to start planning for next school year. But we're planning on starting once a week compost with the lunchroom, and we already have some construction here, so we're going to have to wait until that's finished to see where exactly we can do it on site. But we're looking forward to continuing and starting a new compost program here. So it was really a great experience, and we continue to have fun doing it.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. Thank you all of our speakers for sharing. I know we're at 5:30, and so if people need to leave, that's fine. If anyone wants to stay and ask a specific question, we could go a little over, but I wanted to just mention a few last things before people leave. We do have the sign out sheet for Illinois educators who need PD hours. That's in the chat, and we need you to fill that out so that we can get you that PD recognition. And I also wanted to put this back up on the screen one last time. If anyone who's interested in our waste kit giveaway but hasn't signed up yet, you can use this QR code to get your name on that raffle. And I believe that is the end of our slides. So thank you all. And yeah, if anyone wants to ask a last question, I don't want to keep us over too long, but I'd be happy to call out a question if anyone has any last things that they'd like to ask, specifically maybe to our educators. If not, feel free to end and have a lovely evening. I do have one question in our Q&A, if anyone from our speakers wants to answer it, about whether anyone has used AI as a part of like waste audits or parts of their project this year or recently.
I have not. No AI puppets on this end.
Fair enough. Well, that's the only question that we had unanswered. So um, I guess we can just let everyone have their evening. And thank you all again. You will receive a follow-up email from us with this recording, with slides. And I will reach out to the raffle winner and coordinate about getting you your waste audit supplies. Thank you, speakers. Thank you, educators. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Becky.
Thank
Everyone have a
you.
lovely evening.
You too. Thanks so
All
much for
right.
organizing.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.